Daniel Cormier to WWE, is this something that can happen soon? It feels like an inevitability, really, at this point, that Daniel Cormier at some point will end up under the WWE umbrella. Now, Daniel Cormier is seen by many as one of the greatest fighters in the history of UFC. During his time with UFC, Daniel Cormier is a former light heavyweight champion, UFC heavyweight champion too. He's one of the only fighters to be a champion in multiple division, and he's also in the last few years become one of the best commentators at the UFC commentary booth, not only on pay-per-views but on fight nights, and he's part of the preparation for a lot of UFC shows too. So he is very much ingrained in UFC, but he's a man of many talents. As I mentioned, he's also a fighter, but also a commentator too. Now, Daniel Cormier is also well known for being a big fan of professional wrestling, specifically WWE, and he has now revealed during an interview with Sports Illustrated that he has been in talks with WWE now that his UFC career has come to an end. His UFC career came to an end a couple of months ago after his defeat to Stipe Miocic for the UFC Heavyweight Championship in the third fight in their fight trilogy. Now, Daniel Cormier's career ended in August after his fight against Stipe Miocic, where he was unable to win back his championship. However, now, during an interview with Sports Illustrated, Daniel Cormier has revealed that he has been in talks with WWE about a future role in the promotion. He also teased a feud with the likes of Roman Reigns too, which we'll touch on in a second. But Daniel Cormier, his fandom of professional wrestling is well documented. He's always posting about it on social media, and he's been to several WWE shows and just other professional wrestling shows during the past. But during this interview, he did admit that he had been talking to people in WWE. This isn't the first time that he has, by the way, and he's also singled out WWE as a company, a promotion he's been watching and loved his entire life. He said, quote, "We've been talking, we've spoken to some people over there in very early conversations. WWE is a company I've watched and loved my entire life." Now, as far as what his role could be in the WWE should he go there, he kind of ruled out immediately coming in and being a full-time wrestler. He said at this stage of his career he'd rather be in the commentary booth. He said, quote, "Put me at the commentary table, let me call the matches for 6 months and tell you how great these wrestlers are in the ring. I would love that, and I wouldn't be faking it. WWE is something I've loved my entire life." However, he hasn't ruled out ever competing inside of a WWE ring. He also teased a feud with the likes of Roman Reigns. He said, quote, "Then, after those 6 months, what if I'm sitting next to Michael Cole and Roman comes over and smacks the microphone out of my hand, but I'm an announcer, will I hit him back? Then you're asking if this will happen or not. That's what I want. The slow build, the type of story you want to see, and your heart feels like it's going to explode while you're waiting for it. Give me the slow build, let it simmer," end quote. So there's a lot to break down there, but before we do, I think it's also good to point out what his feelings are to AEW, because nowadays, of course, if you are any professional wrestler or you're anyone stepping into the world of professional wrestling, WWE isn't the only game in town anymore. There's multiple options. One of those options is AEW. So would Daniel Cormier be interested in going to AEW? Daniel Cormier, when he spoke to Sports Illustrated, kind of ruled that out. He's had some past issues with Cody Rhodes, because when he was asked if he would consider heading to AEW in the future, he did point out that he had issues with AEW Executive Vice President Cody Rhodes, did praise what the company was doing, but he admitted that he hadn't watched much of what AEW has been doing. He said, quote, "I haven't really watched AEW as much, but I'm sure they're doing fantastic things over there. I had this whole thing with Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks a few years ago that wasn't the best, but that's water under the bridge. I'm happy that those guys are doing well," end quote. So, what was the issue with DC and Daniel Cormier? Well, you know me. I'm on these kind of things, so I digged it up. I found the tweets. This was back in December of 2017, and Daniel Cormier was, I guess, seeing some clips of some independent professional wrestling. He posted a tweet that said, "This is actually pathetic. This is what people want to see. Go to a goddamn gymnastics competition. Suplex, body slam, pile driver, do some old school wrestling, man. DDT. I remember when the Frankensteiner was the most you'd ever see someone flip. I say boo to this BS." Now, Cody Rhodes at the time did respond to DC. He said, "It's not pathetic. The paying audience enjoyed it." UFC is thriving and pro wrestling has been going strong since 1920. ... Besides, most of y'all ask Hunter for a job when the wheels fall off anyway, and most are on the comp list at Staples, so lay the F off. Cody Rhodes there. Feisty Cody Rhodes. That's sometimes what you get with Cody Rhodes, isn't it? He's sometimes the corporate, very nice, very polite, all about positivity, and then sometimes on social media he can just go. He can just go. I mean, he's not lying there. The audience, I'm sure, did enjoy it. UFC is thriving. Pro wrestling is still going strong today, and there is a history of a lot of former MMA and UFC fighters asking Triple H or WWE for jobs once they've finished their UFC career. Cain Velasquez, Brock Lesnar, Ronda Rousey, etc. Chris Cyborg has asked for jobs. Conor McGregor always flirts with WWE, so he's not wrong. And you do see a lot of UFC fighters at the Staples Center in Los Angeles. You see a lot of UFC fighters at many WWE events, so I'm not sure on that one. But Cody Rhodes obviously was feeling very territorial at the time. I'm sure now, as an executive vice president, as the corporate Cody Rhodes, he probably wouldn't say that. But according to DC, it's water under the bridge. And to be honest, it's a conversation, DC to AEW, that you don't really need to have, because he'll go to WWE. He will go to WWE. WWE have wanted him for a long time. Specifically, Fox have wanted Daniel Cormier in WWE as far back as 2018. When WWE signed that contract with Fox back in 2018 to bring SmackDown to Fox in 2019, and obviously SmackDown's on the air with Fox right now, that was one of the names that Fox brought up to WWE. They said, we know DC's a fan, we know his career in the UFC has maybe got 1-2 years left in it, which was exactly the case. We want him to be on the program because they wanted him. They want him. And Daniel Cormier is a huge wrestling fan. And as I mentioned, this isn't the first time that WWE have had discussions with Daniel Cormier. Now, obviously, these discussions are more legitimate now because Daniel Cormier is no longer fighting in UFC. I think he still will be doing commentary, but he's no longer fighting. So these discussions now are a bit more legitimate, but there have been conversations in the past. Quite a few. I believe he was very close to making some kind of SummerSlam appearance a few years ago, but then fights come up, things happened. Daniel Cormier has a very busy schedule. Not only at the time was he fighting and commentating for UFC, he's a wrestling coach as well, and he's all over the place. So he's a very, very busy man. So that deal never happened, but they've wanted him for a while. And myself personally, I would love him. I would love him to join the SmackDown commentary team. I really would. Because I think you look at it, SmackDown at the moment, the commentary team is Michael Cole and Corey Graves. They do an okay job. They're fine. Not the best commentary team ever by any stretch of the imagination, but they're fine. I think the interesting thing about commentary on Friday Night SmackDown right now is it's a two-man booth or a two-person booth, because WWE over the last, I don't know, you say a couple of years, it's probably been longer than that, at least the last 5 or 6 years, they love the three-person booth. They love having 3 people in that commentary booth. You have the lead play-by-play, you have the color commentator, and then you have the sort of analyst, the data analyst guy or female in there. That's what they want when it comes to a commentary team in WWE. So it is surprising that in 2020, WWE has a 2-person booth on SmackDown, on Fox, because WWE loves that 3-person booth nowadays. So it's very, very surprising that WWE would still have a 2-person booth on their biggest show, because SmackDown is their biggest show. It's the most viewed show. It makes them the most money. So maybe you could look at it by a certain point. Maybe they're saving that 3rd spot for DC. I mean, I doubt it. I doubt they had that in mind, because they would just put someone in and take them out whenever DC comes in. But hey, it's fun to look at it like that, isn't it? But to me, DC to WWE, it's inevitable. It is inevitable. It will happen at some point. Support for Wrestle News 365 is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Now, Manscaped, for all of my UK fans out there, Manscaped just launched in the UK. Over here in the United Kingdom, we have gone for years and years and years without using the right tools for the job. But now you can be one of the first men in England to experience their life-changing product. But it's not just limited to all of the great fans over here in the UK. This offer goes worldwide, so all of my friends over in America and around the world that are listening to this offer still does apply for you. You can still use our code. But I got to tell you a quick story first. Now, there have been so many times, right? I'm a guy. You gotta groom down there, fellas, right? That's the most important thing. You gotta keep yourself trimmed. You gotta keep yourself proper. And a lot of the time, I've been guilty of this, of using the wrong tools for the job. I've had incidences, I'm not afraid to say it, where things have been nicked, snagged, or in fact cut down there because I wasn't being careful enough and using the right equipment. Now that just shouldn't happen. That shouldn't happen. You don't want to be worrying about cutting yourself down there. Do you know how painful that is? I can tell you, it hurts quite a lot. And I wish and hope to God it never happens to me again, and it won't happen to me ever again because I'm using Manscaped products. That's why Manscaped has redesigned the electric trimmer. The Manscaped engineering team has perfected the greatest ball hair trimmer ever created. Big statement, but it's absolutely true. They have just released the new and improved Lawnmower 3.0 in the UK. It's also available around the world as well. Their third generation trimmer features a cutting edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents. So those cuts and snags that I was telling you about before are a thing of the past. And let me tell you, when I tell you this is premium, I mean premium. The battery will last up to 90 minutes so you can get a longer, perfect shave. And not only that, you don't want to be cutting yourself and trimming yourself all over the bathroom, getting hair all over the place. That's just disgusting. The lawnmower has a waterproof technology that allows you to groom in the shower, so no more mess. And one of the coolest features, one of my favourite features about the lawnmower is the LED light which illuminates grooming areas for a closer and more precise trimming experience. So you can shave longer, you can shave more precisely, and you can shave in the shower. What more did I need to tell you? They've also upgraded to a 7,000 RPM motor with quiet stroke technology, and let's not forget about the charging stand. You can show off your mower loud and proud because this intelligently designed stand is a convenient charging dock powered by USB. So, if you are listening to me speak right now, I want you to experience it firsthand for yourself. Let's get that bush to tush clean, and you can get 20% off and free shipping. Yeah, you heard me right there. 20% off and free shipping. All you have to do is use the code 365wrestle at manscaped.com. Make your testes their besties. That's 20% off and free shipping. Not only are you getting 20% off, you're getting free shipping as well with the code 365wrestle at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com, and use the code 365wrestle. Your balls will thank you. He'll mostly commentate because that's what he does, and he does a great job for the UFC commentating on their events and their fights. I'm a big fan of DC, and no offense to the other commentators on the show, obviously Joe Rogan is fantastic, and a UFC event without Joe Rogan just isn't a UFC event. But for me, Daniel Cormier's kind of got to the same level as that now. When Daniel Cormier isn't commentating on the event, I'm kind of like, oh, I wish he would, because he has this great rapport with the likes of Joe Rogan and John Anik, and I really like his style. He's very passionate, and I wouldn't say he's over the top, I would just say he's passionate, and his analysis is excellent. This is a former Olympic wrestler and a former multiple weight world champion. He knows it all. So his analysis is actually fantastic, and he can bring that to WWE. He really can. So I think he does a fantastic job for UFC, and I think he would do a fantastic job for WWE. He would add, I mean, even in the UFC, he adds credibility to a fight because of everything he's done. And he would do the exact same in WWE. He would add credibility to the action that's going on in the ring. Sports-centric presentation, right? How often have we heard that? Sports-centric presentation. We heard it from WWE, we heard it from AEW. Sports-centric presentation. That was such a buzzword, especially last year. It's kind of died down a little bit in 2020. But in 2019, sports-centric presentation was like the ultimate phrase that executives and corporate people and companies like to use when it came to professional wrestling. Sports-centric presentation. And how many reports and how many times did we hear that phrase before SmackDown aired on Fox for the first time? We heard Fox really wants SmackDown to be a sports-centric show. Obviously, it's professional wrestling. Everyone knows the game now at this point. It's a work, it's entertainment, it's in the title, sports entertainment. But what Fox wanted, given that they have the NFL on their network, and given that they used to have the likes of the UFC on their network, what they wanted to have was SmackDown feel more legitimate, okay? Professional wrestling, there is a suspension of disbelief, and there is sometimes a lack of logic that a lot of people love to point out if they're not pro wrestling fans. But what Fox wanted was just this little bit, you know, let's try and make it feel a bit more sports-like. Let's just try and keep it in line with the other sports we have on the network. Let's try and do that. And we heard that Fox wanted that, and that's exactly what WWE was going to do. Well, however many months removed, nearly, a year into SmackDown on Fox, and it's been the furthest thing, really, from sports-centric, because we haven't got that at all. We've had dog suits, we've had dog food, we've had karaoke showdowns, we've got kings, we've got guys carrying around contracts in lunchboxes. That's SmackDown. That's SmackDown. It is a trip into the 1980s mind of Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard on several occasions. So it really is the furthest thing from sports-centric, to be honest with you. But put Daniel Cormier on commentary and he can provide some legitimacy back to the product, I think. His analysis that he would provide gives a sports-like feel. Why? Because he comes from sports. It's not that much for jump. And legitimate sports. He comes from amateur wrestling, Olympic level wrestling. He comes from the UFC. It's just like, it's like when Kurt Angle, right, used to compete in the ring. Kurt Angle, yes, he could do all the sports entertainment stuff. And if anything, that's where he really did thrive. His comedy, his over-the-top stuff was great. But for me, my favorite thing about Kurt Angle was once he was in the ring and he would flip that switch and he was just on and it felt real and he was a sports guy. This was a guy that was, like, he could have fought, maybe if he was 10 years younger, he'd have fought in the UFC and didn't have the neck injuries, and he's all said that himself, really. So he felt legitimate. That's what someone like Daniel Cormier can even provide just being on commentary. And he's a fan. He's a huge fan. There is a clip of Bret Hart. He's at a UFC event. I can't remember for the life of me what year it is. It must be recent, fairly recent. But there's Bret Hart, and he's at a UFC event, and the crowd. It's in Canada, and the crowd pops when they pan and show Bret Hart in the crowd. And Daniel Cormier does this voiceover where he just rattles off everything he's done. He's like the king of the ring, the former Intercontinental Champion, WWE Champion, the best there is, the best there was, the best there ever will be, Bret the Hitman Hart. And you hear it and you just go, this guy is just tailor-made for WWE commentary. He's fantastic. And that was just a cameo in the crowd. So imagine what Daniel Cormier could do to actually telling a story or providing analysis on a real match. It's just, that could be really, really good in WWE. And I think he would add so much to the show. Now, the thing you do have to consider also is, would DC be able to deal with Vince McMahon's producing commands in his ear? Because by all accounts, on those headsets can be some of the most brutal times of your life, because Vince McMahon will scream at you, belittle you, demoralize you with giving his producing commands in your ear. By all accounts, that can be absolutely brutal. Mick Foley, during his run on commentary in 2008, he quit because of it. He was like, I ain't doing this. I'm not having anyone talk to me like that. You know, screw this. I don't need it. He left. JR has told multiple stories over the year about how much he hated it and how brutal Vince McMahon could be on those headsets. And I think Jerry the King Lawler has spoken about that Michael Cole gets it pretty bad on those headsets. So would DC be willing to take that? The thing is, my response to that is, would he be willing to take that? I don't know. But would he even get that? Because by all accounts, Vince isn't like that with everyone. I think he does that to people he knows he can get away with it with, which sounds like a bully. But I don't want to call Vince McMahon a bully, but I think, you know, well, we'll leave that there. But Vince McMahon, for example, Jerry the King Lawler, multiple times says, whenever I'm on commentary, Vince will never say a thing to me in terms of anything like that. He'll never shout at me. He'll never scream at me. He'll never say, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong. He'll never do it. And JR would say that, if anything, Vince McMahon would shout at JR to tell Jerry Lawler. So Vince McMahon, he might not even do that to DC. Vince McMahon does have a history of, he might just play nice with DC. And to be honest, if he did that to DC, I think DC would just get up and leave. You know, I don't need this. He doesn't need this. So I don't know if Vince McMahon would even try to produce him like that. Who knows? As far as in-ring goes, look, I think a lot of people want to see DC step into a WWE ring at least once, right? He's such a big name. He's a big draw. Some of the UFC's biggest pay-per-views have had DC on the card. He's main evented Madison Square Garden shows in recent years. So he is a draw, and because he's a draw, WWE would want to use him as such. So he will get in the ring at some point. I have no doubt about that. Is he going to become a full-time wrestler? Absolutely not. He isn't. And there's a pretty easy explanation for that, because let's face it, he can't. He's 41 years old. And a lot of people were saying about his UFC career that the reason it had to end this year is because he was getting old. And he wanted to retire at 40, not at 41. And unless he does a DDP, but I think even DDP started when he was, 35, 38, something like that. So DC already has him beat by like 3 or 4 years at this point. So he's not going to be a full-time wrestler, not even in the sense that his body can't handle it. He's probably had a lot of injuries from UFC and from amateur wrestling as well. So it's not as if his body isn't completely beat up, but he's just old. It's just not going to happen. He can do a couple of big matches, though. Absolutely, he can do a couple of big-name matches. He mentioned Roman Reigns in that interview, and that, to me, would make a ton of sense. If you've got a name as big as Daniel Cormier, a bit of crossover appeal and all that sort of stuff, you would go against the biggest guy in the company. That makes sense to me. He'd also probably, I would think, do a match against Brock Lesnar. That's a fight that the UFC wanted, and Brock Lesnar and Daniel Cormier wanted for all of 2018 and 2019 in the UFC. But they couldn't get it done for various reasons. Most importantly, Brock Lesnar couldn't come to terms with the UFC in terms of money. So that fight didn't happen. But that can happen in WWE. And Brock Lesnar knows the money he can make in WWE. I think the business model is slightly different in UFC than it is in WWE, where it's not all completely guaranteed. There's, especially now it's on ESPN Plus UFC, that financial side of things is slightly different. In WWE, Brock Lesnar knows how much he's getting paid, and I'm sure DC would get a good payday too. So WWE would throw the proverbial ton of money at both men, and they'd get that match done. So I think that's what we'll see from DC and WWE. I think we'll see him on commentary. I do think we'll see him in the ring. I think we'll probably, like I said, see him against Brock Lesnar, see him against Roman Reigns too. Will it happen in 2020? Maybe. But there's a pandemic right now, and he's only just retired. I think he wants to spend more time with his family. So I don't know right now. To me, that we're in September of 2020 now. So I think, if anything, it's probably more likely to be 2021 when it will happen. Whether it's the Royal Rumble, whether it's WrestleMania, whether he makes his debut on commentary at WrestleMania, who knows? I do think 2021 is more likely, but DC and WWE, in my opinion, will happen. You can clip it, because for me, it feels like an inevitability at this point. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts? Will DC, Daniel Cormier, eventually come to the WWE? Will he be a commentator? Will he be a wrestler? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Really enjoy interacting with you guys on this channel. If you've enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button too. Really just help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, you'll see a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.